The factory floor is a cathedral of iron and smoke, lit by the intermittent flare of welding torches and the dull, persistent glow of machinery embedded with flesh. A single servitor stands at the threshold of assembly, its left arm a skeletal array of pistons and actuators, its right leg still faintly human beneath a lattice of metal plates. Its eyes, clouded with implanted optics, register no curiosity, no fear. This is the Imperium's promise and its cost. Obedience perfected through mutilation. The servitor is both instrument and echo of the human it once was, a compromise of cognition for utility, of life for function. Here, the daily rhythm is governed not by choice but by edict. The pulse of bureaucracy dictating when a limb moves, when a bolt is tightened, when a life is extinguished to satisfy an efficiency target. A single misaligned cog can cascade through the production line, and the consequences are rarely recorded in any official ledger. Servitors emerge from a hierarchy of selection that begins with the convicted, the captured, the orphaned. Their prior existence, criminal, civilian, or psyker, is excised, often in stages that blend surgical precision with ritualized procedure. This process is justified by the Imperium as both pragmatic and holy. Those who become servitors are purged of idleness, sin, and individuality, leaving only the functional kernel. Yet among the many converted, some disappear from registries entirely, their fates unrecorded, their presence hinted at only in whispers among tech priests or the occasional anomalous production log. These unaccounted servitors become the first shadows in the narrative, seeds of unease. Why does the Imperium deliberately omit certain constructs from its own archives? The daily reality of a servitor is a sequence of acts without reflection. Tasks are performed with mechanical precision and unflagging repetition, punctuated by mandatory maintenance, biofeedback calibration, and compliance audits. Any deviation is corrected with immediate lethality or neural suppression. Yet even in this rigid system, anomalies appear. Servitors occasionally hesitate, display what a human might call discomfort, or fail to execute an order in ways imperceptible to the overseer, but significant to those who monitor patterns. These subtle fissures hint at the limits of control, the irreducible humanity embedded in every servitor, however deeply buried. The factory hums as new units are queued for conditioning. Each carries the imprint of origin, the weight of the Imperium's priorities, and the unspoken acknowledgement that this form of labor, this fusion of flesh and machine, is a ledger of sacrifice. It is here, in these quiet corridors of smoke and steel, that the viewer begins to understand the first principle. The Imperium does not simply build servitors. It cultivates obedience at the cost of human memory, identity, and life. What determines which humans are selected, which are erased, and which vanish without record, is a question that will follow us deeper into the hidden machinery of the Imperium. The process of selecting humans for conversion into servitors begins long before the first incision or implant. Convicted criminals, prisoners of war, and orphaned children from war-torn worlds are funneled into the Adeptus Mechanicus's processing chains, their identities reduced to serial numbers and biometric signatures. Each candidate is catalogued, assessed for cognitive resilience, physical endurance, and susceptibility to neural modification. The Imperium regards these measures as scientific. The reality is far closer to ritualized eradication of selfhood. Even in worlds far from the front lines, the criteria are brutally consistent. Obedience is paramount. Adaptability is expendable, and the value of life is measured in production quotas and battlefield utility. The selection process is itself a ceremony of omission, each rejection a human cost buried beneath administrative justification. Once chosen, candidates enter the conditioning sequence, a fusion of mechanical engineering, chemical sedation, and psychical subjugation. Muscle fibers are reinforced with synaptic actuators. limbs replaced or augmented with hydraulic arrays, and sensory organs upgraded with optical, olfactory, and auditory implants. Neural lobes are rewired to accept command codes, obedience protocols, and task-specific cognitive loops. Psychers, among them, undergo a parallel regimen wherein psychic channels are dampened or redirected to prevent catastrophic feedback, often at the expense of memory, emotion, or even consciousness itself. Those who resist or fail to survive the conversion are classified as material loss and quietly interred within factory mausoleums. It is here, in these chambers of deliberate erasure, that the first hints of unrecorded servitors appear. Bodies or consciousnesses removed from official registries, yet lingering in the hushed recollections of tech priests who operate beyond public scrutiny. The conditioning process is as much social as it is technical. Candidates are made to recite litanies of obedience, acknowledge their expendability, and internalize the doctrine that individuality is sin. This indoctrination ensures that once they leave the processing bays, the servitors' actions are predictable, their compliance absolute, yet cracks persist. Anecdotal reports note a servitor hesitating to complete a task when the logic conflicts with instinct, or pausing as if memory lingers from a prior life. These anomalies, though rare, are carefully monitored. The Imperium tolerates them only within tightly controlled parameters. Beyond the official line, whispers suggest that some deviations are tolerated intentionally, part of an unspoken program to observe adaptability under duress or to test the boundaries of psychic integration. As the newly minted servitors are deployed to manufactoria, armories, and battlefield positions, the human cost of their creation becomes visible in micro-vignettes. A technician mourning the last traces of a brother, a psyker whose memories are now inaccessible even to themselves, a worker silently cataloging disappearances. Every unit embodies the intersection of efficiency, control, and sacrifice. The viewer begins to apprehend the depth of systemic logic. The Imperium does not merely convert humans into tools, it orchestrates their erasure as a function of survival, doctrine, and bureaucratic necessity. The questions planted here will echo in later chapters. What happens to those who resist, who disappear without record, or who display signs of autonomous thought? The answers lie deeper within the hidden machinery of the Imperium, waiting beyond the factory floor. The administration that governs servitor production is a labyrinth of offices, edicts, and audits that few outside the Adeptus Mechanicus will ever glimpse. Every unit, from the simplest labor servitor to the most complex psyker construct, is tracked through layers of record-keeping designed to enforce efficiency and obedience. Quotas dictate how many must be operational on a given manufactorum floor, how many may be deployed to a battlefield, and how many are to be retired or replaced. Compliance audits ensure that no deviation, whether mechanical, psychic, or biological, escapes notice, yet the sheer scale of these operations guarantees that some errors go unrecorded, quietly accumulating in the shadows. One such anomaly is the so-called missing batch, a series of servitors whose serial numbers vanish from registers despite evidence of deployment. These disappearances are often explained as clerical oversight, though whispers suggest deliberate concealment. The bureaucratic machinery operates on principle rather than morality. Every directive, whether issued from Forge World Administratum or a remote sector command, is couched in neutral language that masks the human cost. Efficiency, output, and operational integrity are paramount. The servitors themselves, stripped of personality and memory, function as both labor and ledger, a living accounting system for the Imperium's priorities. Even minor deviations, a limb misaligned, a neural implant glitching, a hesitation in execution, are noted in reports and corrected through immediate intervention. Yet within this rigid framework, some servitors are deemed too unpredictable to maintain openly. The files concerning them are sequestered in restricted databanks, accessible only to high-ranking tech priests or the Inquisition under special mandate. These omissions form the earliest hints of the Imperium's hidden programs, revealing that the official narrative often conceals more than it discloses. Daily oversight is enforced through a combination of ritualized inspection and real-time telemetry. Servitors are monitored in every chamber, their vital signs, output metrics, and compliance codes continuously logged. Any anomaly triggers procedural review, maintenance cycles are accelerated, obedience lobes recalibrated, or, in extreme cases, a complete neural wipe is performed. The paradox is clear. Efficiency demands total surveillance, yet the scale of production ensures that some elements operate beyond direct observation. The human cost is implicit. Tech priests labor long hours reconciling records, while operators witness lives erased in the name of productivity. By the close of the day, the factory hum persists, indifferent to the moral calculus behind each servo-assisted motion. The records are updated, the missing batches noted but unexplained, and the questions raised about unmonitored or anomalous servitors remain unresolved. This tension between official order and hidden anomaly prepares the observer for the next stage of the narrative, understanding how these constructs function in their operational roles and the latent dangers that arise when obedience falters or when the Imperium's logic intersects with human unpredictability. The administrative shadow cast here will echo through combat zones, manufactoria, and hidden archives alike. Servitors deployed to combat zones are among the most visible manifestations of the Imperium's fusion of flesh and machine, yet their presence is rarely acknowledged in reports intended for public record. On the battlefield, they serve as artillery crews, heavy weapons operators, and logistical support, their movements precise, methodical, and devoid of hesitation. Each is programmed with contingency routines: fire when commanded, repair when able, retreat or fall only under catastrophic directive failure. Observing them in action is to witness obedience distilled to its purest form, stripped of initiative, conscience, or fear. Yet even within this rigid architecture, traces of their human origins persist. A servitor hesitating for a microsecond before pulling a trigger, a slight misalignment in gait when traversing rubble, a momentary misfire in judgment. These small fissures, largely invisible to most commanders, hint at the vestiges of the person that once was. Operational integration relies on a hierarchy of oversight. Commissars, tech priests, and sergeant-level officers monitor their performance, noting deviations in real time. Any irregularity triggers procedural intervention, neural recalibration, obedience lobe adjustment, or in severe cases, immediate termination. Combat logs occasionally record anomalies, a servitor acting independently to shield a squad, improvising a repair under fire, or refusing to execute an order when the tactical outcome contradicts ingrained directives. Such behavior is swiftly classified as anomalous, heretical even, and suppressed from standard reporting. The Imperium tolerates no deviation, yet the scale of war, attrition, and battlefield chaos ensures that some acts of autonomy persist long enough to leave traces in secondary logs. The deployment of combat servitors also illuminates the moral inversion inherent in Imperial logic. Life, both human and semi-human, is expendable if it serves the broader strategy. Servitors are counted as tools rather than casualties, their destruction a mere line item in attrition reports. Soldiers adjacent to these constructs often describe a quiet unease, the dissonance of fighting alongside beings that resemble humans yet act without human hesitation or empathy. Such unease is compounded when reports indicate that certain servitors deemed too unpredictable or unusually capable vanish from operational rosters after an engagement, their fates undocumented. These early traces of hidden programs suggest that the Imperium's most extraordinary constructs are often deployed in secrecy, their existence known only to high-ranking officers and select tech priests. Daily combat routines reveal both efficiency and latent risk. Servitors are tasked with relentless drills, continuous engagement, and round-the-clock operation without sustenance beyond maintenance cycles. Their endurance is unmatched, but anomalies, however rare, pose cascading dangers. One misfire, one hesitation, one unrecorded, autonomous act can trigger tactical failures, friendly fire incidents, or unintended collateral damage. In some cases, these deviations are reported as mechanical malfunction, in others, quietly erased from history. The battlefield thus becomes a laboratory for observing obedience under extreme conditions, testing the boundaries of control, and revealing the human residue that persists despite systemic suppression. By the conclusion of each engagement, the servitors return to their designated zones, units counted and recalibrated, yet questions linger. The anomalous actions, the vanished constructs, and the traces of initiative that survive systemic enforcement all hint at patterns the Imperium prefers not to confront. These patterns will resurface in industrial sectors and experimental programs, linking the battlefield anomalies to broader, secretive manipulations. The stage is set for examining servitors' roles in Manufactoria, where the imperatives of efficiency, secrecy, and systemic risk converge in even more unsettling ways. On Forge Worlds, the scale of servitor deployment reaches its apogee, and the human cost becomes less visible, absorbed into the hume of machinery and the glare of furnaces. These industrial servitors operate in Manufactoria, where molten steel flows like blood through veins of iron, where assembly lines stretch for kilometers, and the air is thick with particulate and acrid smoke. Each unit is assigned a specific task: welding, bolt alignment, material transfer, quality inspection. Their movements are precise, rehearsed, and relentless, governed by programmed cycles that leave no room for fatigue or hesitation. The imperatives of output and efficiency are absolute, yet even here, anomalies emerge. A servitor may pause when confronted with a jammed press, or hesitate in recalibrating a misaligned conveyor. In isolation, such deviations are trivial. Across thousands of units, they can produce cascading failures. Oversight is bureaucratic and ritualized. Tech priests traverse the floors, recording metrics, issuing recalibrations, and administering neural adjustments. Every movement, every task completion is logged, audited, and codified. Deviations are annotated and corrected, though not all irregularities are visible in primary records. Some units, unregistered, experimental, or psychologically unstable, are hidden from the official logs entirely, their existence whispered in corridors where apprentices fear to tread. The reason for this secrecy is both practical and doctrinal. The Imperium tolerates no knowledge of constructs whose behavior cannot be fully predicted, for fear of panic, rebellion, or contamination of doctrine. The moral inversion inherent in industrial servitor deployment becomes apparent when one examines the life cycle of these constructs. Human bodies are consumed as raw materials for servitors, and their individuality is systematically erased. A convicted laborer may become 3 or 4 servitors over a single operational lifespan, each with progressively more invasive modifications. Attrition is constant, limbs fail, neural lobes degrade, compliance protocols erode. Replacement is immediate, systematic, and devoid of ceremony. Observers within the Manufactoria note that grief is irrelevant, efficiency is all. Yet, small human traces persist. A servitor may hesitate when interacting with a familiar object, display micro-responses to environmental cues that suggest memory, or linger at a workstation longer than protocol dictates. These faint residues hint at the humanity suppressed but not fully erased. Within this industrial ecosystem, certain disappearances remain unexplained. A unit missing from a line may have been rerouted to a hidden experimental chamber or recalibrated to serve in clandestine operations beyond the manufactoria. These cases form the seeds of unease and foreshadow the more catastrophic consequences that will emerge in the coming chapters, when unmonitored anomalies escalate into disasters that engulf both servitors and human overseers alike. The viewer begins to grasp that the Imperium's logic prioritizes production above human cost, and that the mechanisms of secrecy, control, and eradication extend far beyond any individual forge. By the end of each shift, the manufactoria hums with relentless continuity. Servitors continue their endless labor, and the tech priests move between stations, recording, correcting, and cataloging. Yet beneath the ordered surface, patterns of disappearance, anomaly, and residual humanity persist. These are the threads that will lead into the next chapter, where the integration of psychic servitors introduces an even more unstable element into this already tenuous system, testing the limits of both obedience and the Imperium's tolerance for unforeseen consequence. Psychic servitors occupy a unique and perilous niche within the Imperium's machinery, their integration blending technology, biology, and warp-touched cognition. These constructs are drawn from those whose latent psychic abilities can be harnessed, subdued, and weaponized. The process begins with surgical augmentation, neural lobes reinforced with psychic dampers, cranial implants designed to stabilize and redirect warp energy, and obedience codices that interface directly with both brain and circuitry. The smallest misalignment can result in catastrophic feedback, an event the tech priests term psychological inversion, capable of destroying both the subject and surrounding personnel. The conversion process is methodical, clinical, yet undeniably brutal, designed to overwrite individuality while retaining the volatile spark of psychic potency. Once deployed, Psychic servitors perform roles ranging from battlefield support to navigation of the warp for communication and reconnaissance. Their operational protocols are strict. Psychic output is modulated to prevent deviation, combat actions are programmed to precise specifications, and exposure to warp phenomena is limited to controlled intervals. Failures are intolerable. Even minor lapses, hesitation, uncontrolled energy discharge, or deviation from directive trigger immediate recalibration or excision of the subject. Despite these controls, anomalies persist. Psychic servitors occasionally display flashes of initiative, unintended protective behaviors, or interference patterns unaccounted for in their programming. The Imperium regards these as dangers to be contained, yet they also represent a potential source of tactical advantage, a contradiction that ensures certain units are observed in isolation, far from standard operational theater. The human cost of psychic integration is profound. Original personalities are systematically erased. Memories, emotions, and identity dissolve to prevent psychic instability. Many fail to survive the process at all, succumbing to neural collapse, warp shock, or uncontrolled feedback. Those that do survive are stripped of agency yet retain an unsettling awareness, glimpses of self that manifest as subtle hesitation or micro-gestures invisible to casual observers. This latent cognition is dangerous both morally and operationally, yet the Imperium tolerates it only to the extent that the servitor serves a strategic purpose. Each successful unit becomes a living instrument of control, a fusion of flesh, mind, and machine, whose loyalty is enforced through layers of neural manipulation and ritual oversight. The surveillance and maintenance of psychic servitors are intensive. Tech priests continuously monitor biofeedback, psychic output, and neural stability, often intervening mid-operation to correct deviations. Rituals, litanies, and mental conditioning accompany every interaction, ensuring that the subject's psychic potential remains aligned with the Imperium's objectives. Even so, Systemic fragility persists. On the scale of thousands of units, the probability of catastrophic anomaly cannot be fully eliminated. These risks, seeded early in the conditioning process, foreshadow the industrial catastrophe that will occur in the next chapter, a moment where failure, deviation, and the limits of control collide violently in both flesh and machine. By the conclusion of the integration phase, Psyker servitors exist as both tools and warnings, instruments of war whose utility is inseparable from their volatility. The viewer is led to understand that in this corner of the Imperium, control is never absolute, obedience is enforced through erasure, and the smallest anomaly may precipitate disaster. The threads of risk, secrecy, and latent autonomy converge, setting the stage for the set-piece sequence to come, where these tensions erupt into catastrophe, with consequences that ripple across entire Forge worlds and operational theaters. The Forge world awakens with its usual rhythm. Furnaces flare, conveyor belts hum, and the relentless cadence of servitors fills every chamber. Yet beneath this veneer of order, the seeds of catastrophe have been sown. Anomalous psyker servitors, their neural dampers marginally misaligned, work alongside standard constructs, each executing programmed tasks with near-perfect obedience. Small deviations, invisible in isolation, ripple through the system. A hydraulic press jams, a welding arm hesitates, and a single misrouted command code spreads across adjacent units. The tech priests note irregularities in secondary logs, but the primary operational matrix reports no faults. Confidence in procedural redundancy blinds oversight, a miscalculation that will soon exact a devastating cost. The first indication of disaster is subtle, a faint harmonic resonance in the support girders above the manufactorium floor. It passes unnoticed until a servitor attempting to reroute molten material miscalculates, splattering superheated slag across a containment conduit. Sparks ignite a thin trail of fuel-laden sludge, and the fire spreads faster than safety protocols can respond. Servitors continue their programmed tasks, oblivious to danger. Humans nearby react with conditioned precision, initiating suppression litanies and evacuation sequences, but the anomaly escalates faster than the emergency measures can contain. In seconds, an entire production wing is engulfed in flame, molten metal cascading across the floor, detonating pressurized vessels and rupturing coolant lines. In the chaos, the rogue psyker servitors become both instrument and accelerant. Their minor deviations, once considered trivial, interact unpredictably with thermal conduits and command codes. Some units attempt to reroute flows, only to compound errors, while others cease operation entirely, their neural loops overtaxed by conflicting priorities. The tech priests scramble to intervene, issuing override commands and deploying maintenance teams, but each intervention encounters new hazards. Magnetic cranes fail, automated gantries collapse, and pipelines rupture, hurling superheated alloys into open corridors. Human casualties mount, their deaths catalogued in immediate reports, though secondary and tertiary losses, injured technicians, severed servitors, structural compromise remain uncounted. Witnessing the event is to observe the Imperium's cold calculus in action. Survival and continuity of function outweigh individual life, yet the cost stretches far beyond official metrics. The fire, smoke, and collapsing infrastructure expose the fragility inherent in a system that combines flesh, machine, and unpredictable psychic energy. In whispered corridors, tech priests later speculate that the anomalous units were deliberately destabilized, part of a hidden experiment testing both obedience thresholds and the limits of warp-integrated constructs. The very failures that threaten life may have been planned contingencies, a moral inversion wherein disaster itself is data. By the conclusion of the event, the manufactorium lies in partial ruin. Servitors remain operational where structural collapse has spared them, continuing tasks that no human could endure. The casualties are processed, the fire contained, and production resumes under tighter oversight, yet the memory of the event persists. Reports are sanitized, anomalies erased, and the involvement of rogue units suppressed in official records. The viewer, however, is left with the knowledge that this accident was both symptom and experiment, a vivid manifestation of systemic risk, human cost, and the Imperium's willingness to sacrifice the expendable to maintain its logic. The catastrophe establishes the principle that even the most controlled constructs can become vectors of chaos, when human ingenuity, systemic oversight, and psychic instability intersect. It is a turning point, anchoring the narrative in both horror and doctrinal hypocrisy. From this midpoint, the exploration of servitors moves toward covert experimentation, hidden archives, and the ethical paradoxes of obedience under extreme conditions, with the viewer now fully attuned to the fragile lattice of control that binds flesh to machine. Beyond the scorched manufactoria and recalibrated production lines, certain servitors are deliberately removed from public records and routed to clandestine programs. These covert experiments operate in restricted chambers beneath the Forge world, shielded from oversight even by most tech priests. Here, constructs are modified with forbidden technologies, warp-infused implants, adaptive combat algorithms, and experimental neurocircuitry that exceeds standard obedience protocols. Each unit becomes a controlled anomaly, designed to test the boundaries of compliance, utility, and psychic resilience. Observation logs note every fluctuation in output, every hesitation, and every deviation, but the results are rarely integrated into the broader operational framework. The Imperium's logic allows such secrecy in the name of strategic advantage, even when the human cost is indeterminate and often catastrophic. The conversion of human subjects for these programs is far more invasive than standard conditioning. Memory retention is selectively suppressed rather than erased, allowing technicians to observe partial cognition and autonomous problem-solving under controlled stress. Neural inhibitors are adjustable in real time, creating conditions where servitors can operate outside programmed parameters for brief periods. Some units are enhanced with adaptive combat code, enabling decision-making that mirrors human intuition, yet always tethered to fail-safes designed to prevent insubordination. Observers note that the most extreme experiments occasionally produce constructs whose behavior cannot be fully predicted, hinting at latent personality traits surviving deep conditioning. These anomalies are logged, studied, and then obscured within a network of hidden archives, forming a silent ledger of Imperium experimentation. Ethical inversion is evident throughout the program. Human bodies are consumed as raw material for constructs whose potential exceeds ordinary operational needs, and the line between survival, utility, and experimentation is deliberately blurred. Psyker servitors are sometimes exposed to controlled warp shocks, both to test psychic resilience and to observe failure thresholds. Failures result in immediate termination, yet each incident provides data, reinforcing the notion that the Imperium measures life not in years, but in the utility yielded before erasure. Some constructs vanish entirely, never to be acknowledged in any official record, leaving gaps that haunt the logs and whisper to the observant that not all servitors are intended to survive even their initial activation. Despite these horrors, glimpses of human residue occasionally emerge. A servitor may hesitate when performing a task that conflicts with previously encoded memory fragments, or exhibit micro-behaviors suggesting residual personality. These subtleties, while imperceptible to most, are monitored with meticulous scrutiny. Observers debate whether these traits represent contamination, emergent behavior, or something closer to intelligence. Whatever the interpretation, the existence of such units reinforces the central paradox of these programs. The Imperium seeks ultimate control, yet control itself generates unpredictability, producing instruments of precision that can simultaneously be vectors of catastrophe. As these hidden experiments progress, the narrative threads of vanished units, anomalous behavior, and latent autonomy converge. The viewer is prepared for the next stage, examining how knowledge is stored, memories preserved, and human identity suppressed in servitors designed to serve as living archives. The unseen programs and deliberate instability introduced here foreshadow both operational risk and moral inversion, bridging the industrial catastrophe to the exploration of cognitive and archival servitors in the following chapter. Among the most unsettling of servitor programs are those designed to preserve knowledge and memory. The Imperium's living archives are constructed from human subjects whose identities are deliberately suppressed, their brains mapped into data matrices and integrated with mechanical systems. These constructs serve as repositories of intelligence, battlefield reports, technical schematics, secret edicts, and even the hidden operational histories of anomalous servitors. Memory is harvested, stored, and accessed, but at the cost of the individual. Consciousness is fragmented, emotions erased, and the self reduced to a functional instrument. What remains is a perfect ledger, a living database that obeys without question. Yet even here, the remnants of humanity persist in subtle forms: hesitation, flickers of recognition, micro-adjustments in behavior that cannot be fully programmed. The process of converting a human into a living archive is deliberate and invasive. Neural tissue is augmented with data conduits and interface nodes, while protective circuitry shields the mind from warp contamination or psychic feedback. Psychers are particularly valuable. Their latent ability is exploited to store and recall vast arrays of information with near instantaneous access. Observers within these programs note that anomalies, brief lapses in obedience, unplanned micro-responses appear even among the most heavily controlled constructs. These deviations, while seemingly minor, suggest that fragments of memory and personality survive the transformation, resisting the Imperium's attempts at complete erasure. Some units are deliberately isolated to study these emergent behaviors, forming a subset of constructs that are monitored more closely than any frontline servitor. The human cost is profound. Individuals sacrificed to living archives lose not only their bodies, but the continuity of self. Friends, memories, and personal identity are extinguished to feed the system. Even tech priests who oversee the process acknowledge its cruelty, justifying it in terms of operational necessity and strategic advantage. The constructs themselves are both invaluable and precarious. Any damage to the neural interface risks corruption, data loss, or catastrophic psychic feedback. Their existence illustrates a paradox central to the Imperium's logic. The most powerful servants are also the most vulnerable, their obedience guaranteed only by complete suppression of selfhood. These living archives provide partial resolution to earlier mysteries. Servitors that vanished from manufactoria or battlefield rosters sometimes reappear in hidden data repositories, their actions and decisions preserved even as their bodies are repurposed or destroyed. The first open loop unregistered and missing units is partially explained here, demonstrating that disappearance does not always signify destruction, but instead a deliberate transformation into a resource beyond public knowledge. The moral and operational contradictions are evident. In preserving knowledge, the Imperium destroys humanity. In seeking control, it fosters emergent unpredictability. The narrative now pivots from archival function to autonomy, exploring incidents in which servitors demonstrate self-directed decision-making. These moments of unexpected initiative, often subtle but occasionally consequential, reveal the persistent human residue within constructs and set the stage for examining both operational risk and doctrinal panic in the chapters to follow. Even in the most tightly controlled programs, Servitors occasionally exhibit behavior that cannot be fully explained by programming or conditioning. These incidents of rogue autonomy are rare, but their consequences can ripple across operational theaters and industrial complexes alike. A servitor rerouting a coolant line to prevent overheating, pausing to shield a human worker from falling debris, or improvising a repair during battle, each represents a minor deviation imperceptible to most, yet profoundly significant. Such acts challenge the Imperium's fundamental assumption that obedience can be absolute, revealing the persistence of vestigial cognition and the latent human residue embedded in every construct. Field reports describe moments of initiative that appear deliberate, not merely algorithmic. Combat servitors have been observed defying standard orders to preserve resources or protect allied units, their actions recorded only in private logs. In Manufactoria, units occasionally adjust production sequences when confronted with equipment failure, preventing systemic collapse. These deviations, though minor in isolation, underscore a broader truth. Even extreme conditioning cannot fully eradicate the remnants of individuality, particularly when constructs are exposed to complex or unpredictable environments. The Imperium regards such behavior as heretical, yet these rare incidents have occasionally been leveraged to test tactical doctrines, creating a paradox in which non-compliance is both condemned and exploited. The Imperium's response to autonomy is rigorous and unyielding. Units demonstrating unexpected initiative are marked for recalibration, neural suppression, or destruction. Reports are sanitized and witness testimonies are archived selectively. High-ranking tech priests monitor anomalies through telemetry and ritual observation, seeking patterns that might predict or prevent recurrence. Yet the very act of monitoring introduces new variables. Observation itself can influence behavior, creating feedback loops in which the servitor's responses become increasingly difficult to predict. The boundary between programmed obedience and emergent behavior grows tenuous, a reminder that the system, no matter how vast, is not infallible. Ethically, the phenomenon of rogue autonomy illuminates the moral inversion at the heart of servitor programs. The constructs exist to serve, to be expendable, yet they retain fragments of awareness and residual personality. In moments of autonomous action, the suppressed human emerges fleetingly, acting in ways that the Imperium neither anticipates nor sanctions. This tension between functionality and residual sentience creates operational risk and doctrinal discomfort, forcing observers to confront the implications of their own systems of control. The very tools designed to enforce obedience thus serve as a mirror, reflecting the limits of authority and the persistence of human traits under extreme repression. These instances of autonomy also connect directly to prior narrative threads. Vanished or unregistered servitors, previously assumed destroyed, occasionally reappear exhibiting behavior unaccounted for in official logs. Anomalous units that survived psychic integration or covert experimentation often display similar emergent traits, linking battlefield improvisation to hidden programs and latent memory preservation. The viewer is left with a growing awareness that control, no matter how comprehensive, is never absolute. The system's human residues will continue to assert themselves in subtle but consequential ways. The stage is set for examining how these contradictions coalesce into the moral machinery of the Imperium itself, where obedience, efficiency, and ethical compromise intersect. The Imperium's moral machinery operates with the cold precision of its servitors, yet it is a system fraught with contradictions, blind spots, and calculated compromises. Obedience is enforced through neural suppression, ritualized indoctrination, and bureaucratic oversight, while efficiency is elevated above human life. Yet even within these iron constraints, emergent behavior, latent memory, and vestigial cognition assert themselves. The result is a paradoxical ecosystem in which the most controlled constructs can become vectors of unpredictability and the very protocols designed to suppress individuality simultaneously reveal it. Observers within the Adeptus Mechanicus, though trained to perceive this as anomaly, often confront the ethical dissonance of their own interventions. Each correction, each termination, each recalibration is both operational necessity and moral violation. Field reports and archival analyses converge to show a pattern. Servitors that disappear from frontline operations, manufactoria, or covert programs are not always destroyed, but frequently transformed into instruments whose existence is deliberately concealed. The living archives, the psychic testbeds, the hidden experimental units, they are all extensions of the Imperium's logic, a reflection of its priorities and blind spots. These cases highlight the tension between doctrinal purity and practical necessity. Obedience must be absolute, yet the system tolerates and occasionally cultivates anomalies for the sake of strategic advantage. The moral inversion is unmistakable. The Imperium sacrifices the individual to ensure continuity, yet the remnants of individuality occasionally manifest in ways that disrupt that very continuity. This paradox extends to the human observers as well. Tech priests, commissars, and administrators operate within a hierarchy of responsibility and secrecy. Each is trained to rationalize the erasure of identity, the conversion of humans into tools, and the concealment of failures. Yet, some retain awareness, subtle doubt, or moral discomfort. Their observations, recorded in secondary logs or whispered across secure channels, underscore the ethical complexity of the system. The same machinery that produces obedient servitors also produces guilt, unease, and in rare instances, subversive knowledge. The human cost is both material and psychological, embedded in the labor of oversight as well as in the bodies of the converted. In reviewing prior chapters, the industrial catastrophe, covert experiments, and rogue autonomy reveal a consistent theme. The Imperium's logic prioritizes systemic continuity over individual agency, yet its interventions cannot entirely suppress the human residue embedded within its constructs. Anomalies, vanishing units, emergent behaviors, and residual cognition persist, forming a lattice of unpredictability against which the Imperium must constantly adapt. These contradictions illuminate both the fragility and resilience of the system. Obedience is enforced, life is expendable, yet memory, personality, and autonomy continue to exert subtle influence. As a synthesis, the moral machinery exposes the core principle of the Imperium's operational philosophy. Control is paramount, utility is measured, and life is secondary. Yet control itself is never complete. The constructs, observers, and hidden programs form a continuum of obedience and sentence efficiency and unpredictability. This understanding paves the way for examining the final catalogue of extraordinary unrecorded servitors, linking the ethical, operational, and human threads into a cohesive narrative that both resolves early mysteries and underscores the system's enduring tensions. The final catalogue of servitors, those deliberately unrecorded or extraordinary in function, offers both resolution and unease. Among them are constructs designed for clandestine combat, covert industrial experimentation, and psychic amplification. One unit, extracted from a missing manufactorium batch, demonstrates adaptive problem-solving in a toxic atmosphere, rerouting material flows and preventing catastrophic failure without intervention. Another, a psychic servitor from a shadowed research wing, retains fragments of memory that allow it to manipulate warp energy with precision. Yet its loyalty remains absolute, enforced through neural suppression. These examples illustrate the recurring paradox. The Imperium demands obedience, yet the constructs retain enough residual cognition to exceed expectation and risk. A third category includes living archives, whose original identities have been partially preserved, encoding forbidden knowledge that remains inaccessible to most tech priests. These units serve as repositories of history, operational doctrine, and battlefield data, yet their very existence hints at a deeper moral contradiction. The human consciousness embedded within, though fragmented, occasionally surfaces in micro-behaviors, hesitations, adjustments, or inexplicable efficiency that suggest memory and personality are never fully extinguished. Observers within the Adeptus Mechanicus note these anomalies, cataloging them carefully while concealing them from broader operational records. Several servitors are known only through indirect evidence. Battle reports describe units performing actions inconsistent with programming, shielding humans from danger, adapting to unforeseen mechanical failure, or initiating sequences that suggest deliberate foresight. Their serial numbers vanish from official registries immediately after these events, suggesting deliberate concealment. These anomalies connect directly to earlier open loops. Missing units, covert experiments, and incidents of rogue autonomy now converge. The narrative thread is complete. Disappearances are not failures, but deliberate transformations, and emergent behaviors are the byproduct of latent humanity preserved even under extreme conditioning. The final subset involves constructs modified for secrecy and lethality. Hybrid units combining psychic, mechanical, and biological adaptations, deployed for operations so sensitive that their very existence is classified beyond comprehension. Observed only in secondary logs or through whispered testimony, these servitors embody the extremes of Imperium logic. Total obedience enforced at the cost of human identity, yet unpredictably powerful, occasionally autonomous, and always expendable. Their operational value and ethical cost encapsulate the central thesis of the system. Control is paramount, but control is imperfect. Utility is measured, but morality is subordinated. And even within the most ruthless framework, humanity persists in fragments. The catalogue concludes the survey of servitors that the Imperium does not want known. It reconciles the threads planted throughout the narrative: vanished units, industrial catastrophe, psychic anomalies, covert experimentation, and emergent behavior. The constructs exemplify the Imperium's moral machinery in microcosm, demonstrating both the operational genius and ethical inversion that define its civilization. In the final analysis, the viewer is left with the understanding that obedience, efficiency, and secrecy are inseparable in the Imperium. Yet they coexist with unpredictability, human residue, and the ever-present cost of life converted into function. The shadowed servitors, unacknowledged yet consequential, remain a testament to this enduring tension. Beyond the catalogued top servitors, the Imperium maintains a subset of constructs whose existence is deliberately obscured even from senior tech priests. These units, often experimental hybrids, exist at the intersection of utility and secrecy, designed to probe both human and machine limits. They operate in isolated chambers, shielded from telemetry, and monitored only intermittently through encrypted records. The human cost in their creation is extreme. Neural pathways are rewritten, memories partially preserved or intentionally corrupted, and obedience enforced with a combination of chemical sedation, ritualized litanies, and invasive implants. Unlike standard servitors, their tasks are unpredictable, their outputs occasionally self-directed, and their existence hidden from all but the highest echelons of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Operationally, these hidden servitors test the boundaries of compliance. Some are deployed to simulate battlefield anomalies, introducing controlled chaos into armored engagements to observe unit resilience. Others function in manufactoria as contingency labor, completing critical tasks in emergency zones while leaving minimal trace in official logs. Each unit's behavior is scrutinized for patterns of initiative, hesitation, and emergent problem-solving. In many cases, anomalies are intentionally induced, creating conditions where latent cognition surfaces. Observers record micro-adjustments in movement, problem-solving during mechanical failure, or subtle interactions with humans that suggest residual awareness. These behaviors, though suppressed in the final analysis, inform future design protocols, guiding the creation of increasingly efficient and obedient constructs. Ethically, the existence of these units exemplifies the Imperium's moral inversion. They are valued for their utility, yet exist at the expense of fully realized human life. The subjects are stripped of identity, coerced into obedience, and then leveraged to test limits that ordinary constructs would fail to navigate. Failures are systematically erased, yet the consequences often ripple outward. Collateral damage in production zones, unrecorded casualties among technicians, and psychological strain on those tasked with oversight. These consequences are noted only in secondary logs, and even then selectively maintaining the appearance of control while masking the ethical compromises inherent in the program. Patterns emerge linking these hidden units to previously observed anomalies. Rogue autonomy, vanished servitors, and latent memory preservation are not isolated incidents but deliberate design parameters. The Imperium's logic allows for unpredictability to be harnessed strategically, creating constructs that both obey and exceed expectation, yet remain expendable. The tension between control and emergent behavior persists, illustrating the paradox of a system that seeks perfection through erasure, only to encounter resilience in human residue. In conclusion, these obscured constructs provide the final layer of understanding regarding the Imperium servitor programs. They bridge the operational, moral, and ethical threads explored in previous chapters. The industrial catastrophe, covert experimentation, psychic integration, and emergent autonomy converge here. The viewer is left with the awareness that the Imperium's pursuit of obedience, utility, and secrecy generates a continuum of constructs. Some fully controlled, some anomalous, and some hidden entirely, each a testament to the enduring tension between human cost and systemic efficiency, obedience and unpredictability, memory and erasure. Across the Imperium, the consequences of servitor programs extend far beyond individual manufactoria or battlefields. The systemic logic that drives selection, conditioning, and deployment of these constructs shapes industry, warfare, and administration. Quotas, edicts, and audits dictate production, yet the human cost is embedded invisibly within the machinery itself. Lives erased, memories suppressed, and residual cognition suppressed, but never fully eliminated. The industrial catastrophe, rogue autonomy, psychic integration, and hidden experimental programs are not anomalies. They are expressions of the same structural principle. Efficiency is paramount, obedience non-negotiable, and human life measured in functional utility rather than years lived or experiences endured. The operational consequences are equally stark. Servitors accelerate production, maintain war machinery, and stabilize logistical networks. Yet the system is inherently fragile. Small deviations, hesitations, emergent problem-solving, or unexpected initiative can cascade, producing mechanical failures, industrial disasters, or tactical anomalies on the battlefield. These incidents reveal both the limits of control and the paradoxical resilience embedded within the constructs. The Imperium responds with procedural rigor, recalibration, eradication, neural suppression, and secrecy. Yet each intervention is both corrective and morally corrosive, reinforcing the central tension between obedience and latent humanity. Administratively, the programs reinforce the Imperium's hierarchical rigidity. Missing units, unregistered servitors, and hidden experimental constructs are concealed in databanks, accessible only to high-ranking tech priests or the Inquisition. Field reports are sanitized, casualties minimized in official metrics, and anomalies rationalized as mechanical failures. The system rewards compliance, punishes deviation, and conceals ethical compromise beneath layers of bureaucracy. Yet whispers persist in secondary logs and whispered testimony. Anomalies recur, latent cognition survives, and human residue continues to assert itself, even in the most controlled constructs. The tension between secrecy and observable behavior shapes policy, experimentation, and doctrine, creating a feedback loop in which the very methods of control generate further unpredictability. Strategically, the Imperium treats these constructs as indispensable yet expendable. Top servitors, psychic hybrids, and living archives provide unmatched operational advantage, yet their maintenance requires constant oversight, systemic redundancy, and moral compromise. Each unit embodies the central paradox of imperial governance. The pursuit of perfect obedience produces both efficiency and instability, compliance and emergent autonomy, utility and ethical inversion. The human cost, obscured, erased, or deliberately manipulated, remains a quiet ledger that shadows every decision, every edict, every production cycle. In conclusion, the Imperium's servitors represent a civilization's attempt to master life through mechanization and psychic manipulation. Yet mastery is never complete. The constructs are simultaneously obedient and anomalous, productive and destructive, erased and remembering. The observer is left with a singular understanding. Control, utility, and secrecy define the Imperium. Yet the persistence of human residue ensures that obedience is never absolute, morality is always compromised, and even the most efficient system carries the imprint of what it has destroyed. The shadowed servitors, unacknowledged yet consequential, stand as a testament to the cost of this order, a final ledger written in flesh, machine, and memory.